I'm just gonna, it says connecting, but I'm going to assume it is connected. You are looking live. When I say that, Ethan Strauss, does that resonate with you as the catchphrase of one particular broadcaster? You are looking live. Does this mean much to you?
I feel like I've already been put on the spot, and it's like Doyle Brunson, poker is putting a man to a decision. You're putting me in an interesting decision off the bat where I could lie for the sake of maintaining this sort of illusion of erudition with sports and broadcasting. And if I just said confidently, "Come on, of course I know, Mike," you might know me, and I might get out of this.
Right, right. So it is a more anodyne phrase than, Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships that say, you are looking live. Doesn't everyone say that? But to me, and I'm 53, this is squarely the catchphrase, although it might be a little grandiose, of Brent Musburger. Brent Musburger
Oh,
would always say that, you are looking live. Now, maybe everyone else says that too, right? Maybe Jim
oh,
Nantz says that all the time.
well, I mean, I mostly know him for his work as the horniest broadcaster of them all. And
He owns that, though.
I forget about what happens at the beginning of the broadcast because I'm so distracted by when he's looking at the stands and going, "Oh, that's really with Musburger take away the game." He's also just got a wonderful voice. But you're right, that is his phrase.
He also, so during the ABC Monday Night Football Roone Arledge period, they called those the honey shots.
Mm,
When the pretty girls in the stands, the honey shots.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Different era. He flew a little close to the sun in the social media era, old man Musburger did with the girlfriend of the quarterback of Alabama. I remember that was a thing that he got a little too excited, a little too excited.
Yes.
There. Oh, out there, that's why you want to play quarterback.
But he also would, and so did Al Michaels, intimate that he knew what the point spread was, and people loved that, right? So like when it was 14-0 and a meaningless field goal would be kicked, each would say a lot of people caring a lot about the trajectory of that particular field goal, and it just gave him such credibility with the fans.
Yeah, well, he had multiple vices, that Musburger. He had lust and gambling, and that was part of why he resonated so much with the American public. I can talk announcing all day. I don't know how popular a topic it is, but I love broadcasting, announcing theories about why it works, why so many of them have New York accents. So many of the great broadcasters, people say it's because Syracuse was so strong in sports media, and that's a lot of it. But I wonder if we want that Al Michaels voice. We want that Marv Albert voice. We want that Bob Costas voice. That's a voice that we want for whatever
No,
reason from our play-by-play guys.
as a San Diegan, which has, and I think you taught me this more than anyone, has an odd accent.
Yeah.
You think that of those you mentioned, I'd say Marv Albert, certainly intonations. I don't hear it that much with Al Michaels, and I definitely don't hear it with Bob Costas. But you do. You hear a New York accent.
Of course you don't hear it. You're like a fish that doesn't know it's in water. Of course you. You think there's
What does Costas say? That's New York.
his accent's a New York accent. I don't have a particular phrase. He's not like, "Hey, get out of here!" Like he's not doing that, but he's clearly New York. Yeah, my people are never going to announce anything of import. I'm trying to think of sort of famous call. Oh, do you believe in miracles? That's not going to be something that the public. That's not going to want San Diego in their Howard.
I would
I think he was New York.
Howard Cosell was definitely New York. And also, and I've gone back and watched whole broadcasts of Monday Night Football. Terrible. Like
Mm.
he would go on these tangents where he would literally quote Baudelaire, but it wasn't high-minded. It was just him showing off his erudition, but it wasn't even placed. It made no sense. It was, the whole contrast between him and Dandy Don, but really just an unlistenable bore for much of it. Now, there were great moments. He did a lot. He did great stuff with Muhammad Ali, but his Monday Night Football broadcasting, I'll get to another critique, was terrible, would never fly today. And the whole idea of it being criticized because he was the guy America loved to hate. I mean, we only had 3 networks, so we didn't know anything. We were correct to hate him. It was terrible broadcasting. But also, the very nature, the deepest thing they would ever say on a Monday Night Football broadcast was maybe, you have to establish the run to sell the pass. Maybe. I mean, the level of sophistication, I think they've gotten way too sophisticated. And I don't know how many people watching now care about A gap responsibility. But it was crazy and it was unwatchable. And I guess without the honey shots, we never would have come back.
Well, everybody was drunk back then, and so was he.
Yeah.
So if you were drunk be on that wavelength, I think you would know what was good about it, perhaps, and that's what's been lost to time. And that's something we've really gotten away from. Multiple cultures. You ever see it might have been called Floyd on Fish, that British cooking show? That guy,
Yes. Yes.
that guy was drunk, and the Brits loved him as the greatest cooking show man there ever was. He was their Bourdain, who also was pretty drunk back in the day,
Also drunk.
also very drunk, but more so back then, and that was just part of the show. And people were expected to be sloppy. It's funny, maybe people dressed better back in the day, but they acted more inebriated apparently.
I'm going to throw out the hottest of hot takes, and this might be someone who you hold in high regard. Jason Richardson seems like the nicest guy in the world who has never said anything interesting in an NBA broadcast. Discuss.
J is in the dunk competition. Are you talking about Richard Jefferson?
Oh, Richard, I said Jason Richardson. Yes, Jason Richardson played for Michigan State, right? Okay.
And the
Yes,
We
Richard
Believe
Jefferson.
Warriors. And I was
Yes.
just I could not have anticipated that name pulled out. I would name 100 names before I would got Richard Jefferson. I think I would get to. I think what his broadcasting is being helped along by being more interesting off of the main product.
Hmm.
He says spicy things in podcasts, and he'll attack his former Arizona teammate Gilbert Arenas, and he'll be fun in that format. I think it allows him to be boring, absent much critique, but he's very ambitious. I think he wants that top spot. I think he's been going for it for a while. There's a lot of political games behind the scenes for that broadcast and for being on the main show of the NBA. And he's wanted it, and JJ Redick taking that job opened up the door for him. That was a whole mess. I don't know how many people. Here's the thing, Mike. The people right now, you right now, live listening to us, I don't know what you want. I don't know if you're my people. I don't know if you're Mike's people. I don't know if you want to hear about broadcasters from the 1970s. I don't know if you want to hear about the vibe shift in politics. I have no idea, Mike. And that means I just don't even know where to go with some of this stuff.
We're going to ignore the audience. How about
Oh,
that?
okay.
We'll
Okay.
just if someone has a question or Biscuiteer showed up in my talk with Pete Fornatel, and I thought it was a reference to Seabiscuit. So I see a couple of these people here, but we're going to talk about what we talk about. How do you think Dora? Well, let me go back. I was about to say that nothing recedes. Mamet says nothing recedes more than a great meal, but I think nothing recedes more than a broadcaster. And your rock stars, your actors, your even minor authors stay with you. People who define the culture. But the broadcasters who describe the culture, unless they do it so exceedingly well, they just recede into history. And Peter Jennings was once the most, one of the 5 most famous Americans. And within 5 years or 3 years of him being off ABC, people totally forgot who he was. Where are you time wise, in terms of your age with Peter Jennings? Does that mean anything to you? You know who he was, but
Well, I know who he was,
yeah.
but Brokov is a little more indelible because of the weird way he talked. I don't have line.
Battleship. Yes.
Okay.
And this is why we look at battleships. Yes.
It sort of
And
sounds like a slowed down what Rush Limbaugh sounds like in my head, like Rush Limbaugh. That's what that had. Jennings, it's like water through a sieve. There's nothing catching as far as
yeah.
handsome face, uh, beautiful daughter who was a star on the HBO series Girls. And
No, that was Brian Williams.
oh, Brian Williams, another
Yes.
talking head face. You're right.
Like, where'd he go? Yeah. Yeah, beautiful man. I like Brian Williams a lot, a Jets fan. So I bring up Jennings to illustrate the point that great broadcasters just go away forever, and people can't quite understand how gigantic Howard Cosell was. And now he's just a name, and maybe look at that little monkey run, right? One or two unfortunate but probably unfair phrases attached to him. So now you think we're 1 year from the bloodletting of Van Gundy and Mark Jackson, and now we have Doris there, and we have either Richard Jefferson or Jefford Richardson or Jace Richardson or some
Right.
combination thereof. Does anyone care? Has anyone thought of the lack of Van Gundyism in this whole thing?
Dude, I'm glad you brought this up because I've been getting these texts from people and it's been percolating in basketball Twitter. And I saw this shot of Van Gundy and Mark Jackson and Breen. And for those of you who do not know, for exposition, they were the main broadcast for ESPN for, man, I don't know, 15 years, something like that, maybe 10 years. It's a little confusing because Jackson was there and then he coached the Warriors and he came back, whatever, whatever. But they were not, shall we say, a critical smash. There was a lot of about them. A lot of people didn't like what they brought to the table. And that screenshot of them had this caption of, I think it was, you don't really know when you're in the good old days. That was the phrase right. And there's this sense out there from committed NBA fans. I didn't necessarily praise this group together, but I miss them. They had chemistry built up for over a decade, and now there's this revolving door kind of revolving Doris, this awkwardness of the people they mashed together, and Doris is competent. There is this weird element where because she's a woman, people feel either inclined to praise or overpraise in a way that seems a little weird, and then maybe people hate her in ways that are unearned. And there's that element, but there's no chemistry with anybody really there. I don't think that there's any chemistry with Breen. And I do think by and large, if we had a focus group, they would prefer the old broadcast with a bunch of guys not saying anything particularly incisive about strategy, though Van Gundy would have his moments. And they miss the goofy
Yeah.
catchphrases. They miss Mark Jackson saying hand down, man down, and mama, there goes that man. And in the end, I think people just really like familiar. I think people, sports media people, people on Twitter will extol the virtues of strategy and education, but people just want to feel good. They want the Pavlovian, I'm enjoying my sport, and this is the voice I hear when I enjoy it. And there's enthusiasm. That's a lot of it.
Yeah. Van Gundy was a showman. His brother is great too. I love the way they tear into the NBA, and they would always excoriate the excess of how long it takes to do a TV timeout. And when you watch the NCAA games and no one is authorized to criticize the NCAA to that extent, it's so glaring and so lacking. And Stan Van Gundy would do NCAA games, and you can see that he was tempted to do it. But I don't even care if anyone who tells me what a rub pick is or any of these like technical terms, I can get that from Dunked on Sports. I want passion, and I want humor, and I want just saying something insightful and cutting. And I think Van Gundy especially had that. I'm a huge St. John's fan. Mark Jackson was fun in the mix, definitely a New Yorker, and the current iteration is a bit bland.
Yeah. I think Mike Breen, also from the New York area. I don't know if we list.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he was on WFAN for many, many years, and yeah, I have like
Telling you,
in my
man,
head some
this is
Cardinal
what America
Spielman.
This is what America wants. We want certain things. It's unfair to other people. It's unfair that people, for whatever reason, for a nature documentary, want an old man. I don't know
Want,
why.
want an old Englishman? Want Richard Attenborough, ideally?
Well, I would think Old Englishmen, but if you give them a Morgan Freeman, they're going to be
Yeah,
into that.
yeah. If the
And that,
Penguins are going to march, yeah, yeah.
yeah, not fair to all the other groups, but that's what people that's what the public wants. That's just what the market says. I don't know. That's what they want. Uh yeah, and I just love that ineffable quality. These are the things that I obsess over. These ineffable, subjective, why is there resonance? Why is this celebrity bigger than that celebrity? Why is this NBA superstar huge and they can sell all these shoes, but this other NBA superstar just as good? People don't care as much. There's usually a reason. There are often obvious reasons, but for whatever reason, that's just I love that. I love that stuff. I love those
Do you,
unanswered questions.
but don't you love trying to work out theories? And then you acknowledge the theories probably aren't the real theories, but okay. By the way, March of the Penguins, do you know what a lie that movie was?
It was lying about the nature.
What was the main selling point about the Penguins? In a word, monogamy, right? Do you
Oh,
remember this?
oh, you're saying the Penguins are a bunch of sluts? Is that what you're saying, Mike?
They're monogamous for a season. Who can't be monogamous for a season?
It's a very good point. One season. I don't know how my son would think about that. Be a very to ask about right there. Yeah, that is a bit of a lie. That is a lie. Modern nature used to lie to us a little bit as long as that's not revealed. Like they
Yeah,
said,
it's
that Planet Earth Great Escape, where that sea iguana baby just somehow, like the Marshawn Lynch beast mode run, got past all those snakes, and it's an incredible shot. And there's debate to this day of whether they lied and they just put a bunch of shots together. And I don't want to know the answer. If
and if an earthquake could be measured in downtown Seattle, and if Skittles were involved, it was all part of the amazing run.
I want to know the answer to whether
Yeah.
they liked that shot. I just liked the result.
Let's back our way into WNBA shoe talk. But first, just in general, isn't there a general consensus or heuristic that some players are better than others, but the ones whose shoes sell are the ones that you look to shoes for, probably falsely, which is to say, jumping, speed, and flight. So Jokic, great player, who would buy his shoes? They're just gigantic shoes that never leave the floor. You'd much rather buy a Ja Morant type shoe.
Yeah, there's something under Jokic's person supporting him that I'd be curious to have. It would be the horses,
Yeah, I
and
want to buy a Jokic horse. The
yeah,
poor Jokic horse.
yeah, not so much. I mean, look, this is again, this is why it's interesting because we have these rules, we have these heuristics, and then they're confounded when we get new information. I mean, yeah, that was the thought process about who sells shoes. So Nike, when Steph Curry was on his rise, didn't care about keeping him because they went, look, we know what sells shoes. You know, what sells shoes are super athletic guys. That's what
Yeah,
sells shoes.
donks, right.
That's what people are into. This guy, he's not that. So we don't really need him. So he can go anywhere. He can go to Under Armour for all we care. We don't care. And then that's probably a multi-billion-dollar mistake by Nike. And then Kyrie Irving, who's got a similar game, was a great sneaker salesman for them before he got a little weird, as we'll charitably put it. So it turned out that maybe what was more important than the athleticism was just a size that's not gumpy, that we're just not into. It's the bigs. The bigs don't sell shoes. The centers don't sell shoes. Maybe there will be one eventually who then confounds that rule, but it's been a pretty solid
Yeah.
rule. They just
How
don't.
did
Nobody wants them.
the LeBron shoes sell, right? He's so big, but he also can play
Yeah.
small. And I'll get to that in one of my theories. How about Durant? I see him in Dick's commercials. Does he sell shoes?
I don't think that. I think early on his shoes were really good and the advertising was really good. And I think they sold pretty well. We'll never really know because unless you're the top one, they're going to keep it a little close to the vest as far as how much you're really selling. But that was a point of pain to a degree with Kevin Durant that so here's the thing behind the scenes.
What wasn't, Ethan?
What was it? I'm Kevin Durant, or I have been.
Yes.
Um, you know, so I've made this point in my writing that we conceive of these players as having a primary employer, and that is their basketball team. But your primary employer is the company that pays you the most. And for the very tippy top, that is the shoe company. And that's where your status is truly reflected to some of these guys. And they all want to be the face of the shoe brand that they're in front of. They all want to be the face of Nike if they're at Nike. And for Kevin Durant, I don't think it was comfortable to be second. He's famously said, I don't want to come in second. But when he was at Nike, it was Kobe and LeBron. And you're not going to get a chance to be that top salesman because they're going to put all their resources behind promoting the top guy. And there's a huge difference between top and anything else. And he was in that anything
Yeah.
else category. And these are the sorts of things that really can rankle them in ways that we don't think about because we don't necessarily care who the top guy at Nike is or girl at Nike is on the WNBA side. but it's such a reflection of their status in a way that's different from the box score sheet or the contract. To walk around America and just see people wearing your shoes, that's something they care about, in part because that's something that Michael Jordan pioneered as a big cultural artifact that they just didn't have in other sports.
Yeah, and maybe if he had signed with Under Armour and they cut the shoes a little differently, they'd be, 16th of an inch smaller, and it would have been a three-pointer and not a two-pointer against the Bucks in the Eastern Conference playoffs, and then he would be a number one and not a number two. Do the Europeans care that much? What do you know about Luca or the European shoe market? Is it the same thing riding with them on ego?
I think that they just buy Jordans. I don't think that that culture is as prevalent there. I don't know. I haven't seen any evidence of European players just having massive resonance in Europe as sneaker salesmen in a way that the American NBA players fail to. I have seen evidence that the European players maybe don't resonate as much as superstars within the United States, which just speaks to how nationhood is a thing. I don't think it's, yeah, I think that similar to how perhaps Luka Doncic has more resonance in Slovenia, American players have more resonance in the United States, but that's been this awkward component for people to handle because they don't know. And then we get into the whole everything can be reinvented. Luca coming to the Lakers, maybe he is a guy that people care about just because of that alchemy of surprise in the Lakers.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's hard to sell a shoe, Mike. Most of the shoes don't do that great, and you need to be something even better than the best player to truly move merchandise. You need to have a thing. You need to have a brand. It's a difficult thing.
Okay, so the brand used to be actually Nike or the LeBron part of the brand, but it was tied up to a shoe company and they would tell the players, you are the brand. But now, in the age of social media, they don't need the intermediary of fabric and technology and rubber. Their brand can just be their social media appeal. Are players getting more into that? Do they care more about how many people follow them on Instagram than they
Oh,
do how many shoes they sell?
they care about it. I think that maybe that's a new currency because I think sneakers are just less of a big deal now than they were in the 1990s. In the 90s, it broke up the Orlando Magic plausibly. That Shaq was the best player on the Magic, but his Shaqnosises did not sell quite as much as any Hardaway shoes. It was a real point of friction to the point where in one of Shaq's commercials, I can't remember who did it, but somebody batted away like a little voodoo doll, the little penny, whatever we're calling that figurine, when we're on the same team together. So
Wait,
I think it
wait,
was
what is Shacknosis a portmanteau of? I'm not getting the gnosis,
it,
like
hypnosis.
hypnosis?
You're hypnotized by Shaq, obviously.
You're shacknotized? Okay.
Yeah.
Thought it was some economics thing.
Yeah. Just
Hypnosis.
I'd have to go back. I'd have to go back in time. I don't think that sneaker sales do as well overall. I don't think we're going to create or recreate that Michael Jordan 1990s moment. I think that's of a lot of different trends where we're just less of a physical world now than we
Yeah.
were back where a shoe was a huge deal, a shoe release was a huge deal. Everything's kind of like that, right? And so, yeah, I think maybe there's a different currency now, and social media is part of that currency, and getting popular that way is part of it. And I think it's part of it because, again, you're not going to get big monocultural famous as used to happen, where the major corporations and the sports league would say you're the face of whatever, and you were a household name. I think we're out of the household name era. I don't think we're there anymore, save for maybe Caitlyn Clark. And is that a segue? You tell me.
I don't know. I could take it to we want to be in the Jalen, we want to be in the OG Ananobi business. But no, let's go. I'll make this one point. This is, you ready for this name drop? I was interviewing Martha Stewart, and we both came to the conclusion that because what she does is tangible, but of course she's on all the social media and she worries a lot about, like maybe a lot of people with grandchildren do, about how much of our life is virtual. And I floated the theory, and she really latched onto it, that the yearning for what she brings, actual tangible things, taking a moment, making a craft, or maybe even caring about your shoes, tending to your shoes. The rise of not just wearing shoes, but the sneakerhead culture, exactly because so
Uh,
much of our life is virtual and not
uh,
tangible.
I have to turn off my phone 1 second. I just got the little buzzy thing. Did you hear that? This
Yeah, I
is
did. I did. I was
sorry.
what I thought we were doing like morning zoo sound effects. Well, Mike, to
One
that I say, oh ah.
1 second.
Boing.
Great. It's not radio. What it is. I just do you ever have this happen? You resent your friend who's just texting you like they are doing
Yeah.
something when they're doing.
Ta-ga!
I'm so
I-
annoyed at my friend texting me as
yeah.
though it's
I just got a text from my friend while doing this, and he was like, "Have you been following the whole Daryl Cooper on Joe Rogan thing?" I'm like, "I have, but not now, Steinberg."
I feel like that's been going on for a long time as well. I mean,
I know.
is there a
Steinberg's
new
catching up.
I will talk about that, by the way, if you want to talk about that.
No, let's talk Caitlyn Clark. I've not been avoiding it. I'm so interested in everything you've been reporting.
Okay.
To bring people up to speed, Caitlyn Clark is by orders of magnitude the most popular player in the WNBA. She's the most popular women's basketball player of all time. So when you have a property like that and you are in a profit-making business like Nike, logic would dictate, well, let's do what we can to get behind this person in our stable. Let's say make a shoe. However, there is an order or a perceived order. And the notion that Asia Wilson, and if people don't know, great basketball player, I'm going to say the best women's basketball player. She's been in the league, I think, since 2018. So the best, let's call her the best women's basketball player on the planet, doesn't have a shoe. But now Asia Wilson is getting a shoe, which is great, I guess, except for the one thing. If Asia gets a shoe, the thinking goes, and you tell me if this is correct thinking, well, you can't give Caitlyn a shoe at the same time. So right now, with the most popular property the WNBA or women's basketball has ever had, all they're doing is letting that field lay fallow out of deference either to Asia Wilson or the idea that there is no jumping the line, or maybe something having to do, whenever you talk about Caitlin Clark, having to do with race. So is that a good orientation?
Yeah. I think that was fantastic exposition. I find that one to be a fascinating story because there is this mental block, I think. What space are we in, Mike? Are we in what they used to call the heterodox space? I'm not sure what space
You
that.
you mean you and me?
Yeah, I think we're almost an intermediary between the worlds to a
Yeah.
certain. I'm not sure how to think about it all, but I live in the Bay Area. A lot of my friends, social circle, upper middle class, reliable Democratic voting people who roll their eyes at a lot of what might be called social justice or wokeness. They'll admit that it's silly, but there's almost this mental block that it can actually disrupt anything serious beyond hindering the winning of an election. There's no,
Yes, yes.
there's nothing.
It's a distraction, it's a frippery, and we'll acknowledge, this kind of person would say, we'll acknowledge that there's way too much emphasis placed on that, but they'll probably be loath to say, and some horrible things have resulted from, Foursquare getting behind social justice.
Yeah, and I think they assume that there are adults in the room who will pull the handbrake on anything of consequence if it gets too crazy. And this is, I think, a point of perspective on which I differ with a lot of my very intelligent liberal friends, where they just think that this is all on the margins, that it doesn't actually impact anything. And I actually think that ideology and beliefs matter and get reflected in the world. So when I see a company like Nike and I see how they have done the crazy thing, Mike, they have not done an ad with Caitlin Clark. I'm sorry, that's crazy. That is nuts. They've done a lot of ads with a lot of other people. They've
I
had
didn't
her,
even realize that. I know about the shoe. They haven't done an ad. Everyone's done an ad with Caitlin Clark.
they have her in roster ad where she's one of a bunch of people because when you ask them about her, it's this whole we've got this great roster. The WNBA is coming up, and you go, well, yeah, but what about Caitlin Clark? One of the
Sure.
one of the great players we have. I mean, it's this
Yeah.
crazy thing. They have
Jonte Jones and Caitlin Clark, they're all there. Yeah.
the most they've done is there's this little 15-second for social media spot where she's shooting in front of a barn and it's fit for social media and it's part of their sort of girl bossy you can't win so just win campaign. Meanwhile, Gatorade has done at least 3 pricey real ads with her over the last year because Gatorade is operating like a company that likes money and would like to make money from people who spend money. Nike is caught up. It's ideological. It is. I'm sorry. It just is. I know it.
Oh, I didn't realize Wyden and Kennedy was doing ads for the ad council now, just like
Yeah.
public service announcements. They're not trying to move product anymore.
It's insane because it is, and this gets back to this thing about social justice in general, where or diversity, these conceptions. I remember asking Richard Lepchick, the guy who would do the race and gender report cards to different leagues, and I asked him, "Well, is this a moral cause or a business cause? Diversity in that case?" And he actually said business, which rather surprised me, but that's a whole other topic. And I think that some of these companies and some of these institutions, they start operating as though they're a nonprofit and or an NGO, and it becomes this focus of, well, it's not fair if we're putting Caitlyn before Asia Wilson because Asia Wilson was the MVP, and maybe Caitlyn Clark being white is a huge part of this, and so we're just going to pretend that the fifth best-selling WNBA jersey player is the person we need to be making expensive commercials about and building a shoe around that we're instantly going to drop the price point on below $100 for kids, which is very unusual because obviously this isn't a super in demand product. We're basically going to do a Potemkin shoe launch for a product that won't be in demand for social justice reasons. And I will tell friends of mine this, and they will contort and pretzel themselves into going, well, there must be a business justification for what's happened. Is it no, it's just the people. There are enough people at that company who are more worried about fairness and are more worried about this sense of fairness or egalitarianism that it does corrode and infect their ability to be effective business people. I believe that is what's happening. If it's not what's happening, then maybe the answer is even worse, that they're just complete idiots and they have no idea what they're doing.
What's the upside of a Caitlin Clark shoe? Do the experts you talk to say?
I mean, it's billions of dollars. Dick's Sporting
Really?
Goods, again, another company that wants to make money. That apparently, and I know this is weird, they want profit and margins. It's strange. Announced that due to unprecedented demand, they are selling Caitlin Clark's merch in every one of their over 700 stores in America. This
Wow.
is a company that aggressively wants to make money is doing. She's a huge deal. Nearly 19 million people watched that NCAA championship that she was in, and when she wasn't in it, about over 10 million fewer people watched the game.
That is
Uh,
correct. And I did
that
note that in the New York Times article about this, which quoted you, to make the point about how popular women's basketball is, they didn't quote the statistics for the most recent tournament, which is an average of 8.5 million and a high of 9.9. They went back 2 years when Caitlin Clark was in it, and there were 18.9 million watching. And then they said, and some of those players have jumped to the NBA.
yeah, some of those players. There's a lot of Garfunkelism. There's a lot of what about Garfunkel when it comes to the whole story.
A lot of
Uh,
Oatsism.
yeah, there's a lot of yeah, but that's the crazy irony of this whole situation is that
Are you saying Aja Wilson is the Andrew Ridgely of this situation?
now I was stepping outside my comfort zone to make full music references. Now I'm far outside of it.
Okay.
There's just this incredible irony to it because she is such a cultural mover. She is so huge. She is the so rare, vanishingly rare mainstream figure to appear after social media reached critical mass. And that's the reason we have to pretend it's not true because there's so much resentment over what everybody can see and what everybody can feel. That's why we have to say the other players. That's why we have to say the rookies joined. That's why we have to say Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. We can't just admit what's happening like we could when it was Tiger Woods in the 1990s in golf. We can't just have a situation where we go, wow, Tiger Woods really is creating a boom of interest in golf. There's so much resentment over this Tiger Woods figure that it has to become, oh, it's all rising. It's all, I mean, there was the Mystics owner when Caitlin Clark was on the cover of Time saying, why couldn't it have been, I think she was named Athlete of the Year. Why couldn't it have been, I don't know, WNBA Players of the Year or whatever sort of thing?
Yeah, why couldn't you have watered it down, make it meaningless, and have fewer people want to buy that magazine? Why wouldn't they do that in their business interests, like Dick's is?
The answer is
Um,
Mystics owner had to move the venue to Verizon Center or whatever it was because of Caitlyn Clark, because that's what she can do. And it's just fascinating. It's fascinating for me to watch this unfold, to just look at $1 billion on the sidewalk and look at both Nike and the WNBA cross their arms and just go, nope.
And how many and what's the potential market for Asia Wilson sneakers? Like judging by print run and all other metrics that we know.
I mean, I don't want to be too dismissive because life is mysterious. And maybe as the counter signal to Caitlyn, this becomes a market. Who
Okay.
knows? Like,
Right.
but
Not only the Washington team are mystics, we're all in a mystical realm and anything can happen. But
I don't know if there's a market for fifth best selling WNBA jersey. And one of the reasons for it, as we said on the NBA side, is that bigs don't sell shoes. Her game is reminiscent of Tim Duncan's. Tim Duncan, for a time, was the best player in the NBA. And at that time, Allen Iverson was the best shoe salesman in the NBA. So they're operating off this false premise that Asia Wilson should move shoes because of how good she is, but that's not what this game is about.
mhm.
Don't know what the market is. I don't think there's much of a market. They said that the shoes they sold in her weekend launch sold out, but the rumors, the whispers are that they only made a few thousand available. Don't sue me if that's not true, but that seemed to be more of a way to gin up interest with scarcity. I don't think there's much of a market beyond whatever the market would be if you had almost anybody run it. But they have a theory of how this is supposed to go. They've got a big ad campaign. They're spending a lot on it. It's very identity forward. Uh, and we'll see. I just think that it's crazy. It's crazy to delay the whole. They could have come out with the Clark shoe for her rookie year. They did that for LeBron. They've done that for other players. They could have made ads. They just don't seem to want to because they don't want the backlash. That seems to be what this is all about.
How do we know that it's a sense of social justice, emphasis on society versus a couple of important stakeholders within their organization? Maybe you'd piss off Asia Wilson and a couple of big WNBA players. Maybe you'd piss off a couple of whoever, has the WNBA portfolio within Nike. And it was more about a couple of potentially, keeping people who are within your fold happy.
If I've talked to enough people, I've looked for these explanations. Does Phil Knight just hate Caitlin Clark? I don't know. It's just the problem. It's just we're trying to make it smarter than what it is. This is just what it is. It's discomfort. It's extremely online executives. It's worry about controversy and handling all the toxicity emanating from that league. And that's enough to derail this process. That's just what it is. That's what the people involved tell me. So that's what I'm going to go with. And that's what it looks like.
Can't prove this. You never can. But I firmly believe that if Caitlin Clark weren't white, she would be, I'm going to say just as popular, but if you want to say 90 something percent as popular, can't prove anything. And the reason is Caitlin Clark's statistics are right there in terms of popularity. What she did in college was unprecedented. And there are precedents for male basketball players who have that game. And when Steph Curry, a person smaller than everyone else, makes amazing passes, but most importantly, shoots from a great distance at a great length that normal human beings cannot comprehend of, it always captures the imagination of fans and especially children who buy shoes. She is the exact sort of player as Steph Curry is,
I
as
love, I
maybe
love,
people.
I love this. Like, the pro Caitlin Clark argument in this. Like, are you calling children racist? Is that what you're saying?
What
When
I'm
you say
saying
that
is
it needs to be
her
white?
game, her game quite clearly transcends race. Her game is not even talking about aesthetically beautiful. The parts of a game that people can't look away from. When you show someone a highlight, it's either an amazing aerial dunk, with which women can't do on the 10-foot rim. I mean, women can dunk, and Brittany Griner has dunked a ball technically in a game, but this is like technically, and there's no aerial movement. So the only things in basketball that people love are amazing dunks and unbelievably long shots. And Caitlin Clark has done more unbelievably long shots than anyone in women's basketball and most men in men's basketball. And that's why no matter her race, she'd be unbelievably impressive and followed, and everyone would buy her shoes.
My God, I'm gonna outwoke you. I'm gonna outwoke Mike. I'm gonna be the aggressive on this one. Uh, I don't know. I don't know if there'd be that kind of resonance. I think that there's this ineffable quality to branding, and I think white Iowa girl, humble Iowa girl is part of her branding and is especially part of her branding because of the insane backlash, which then gets a bunch of people invested in her because they feel like she's being treated unfairly because she's white. And if she was black, that wouldn't happen. There'd be a lot of affirmation and celebration, but there wouldn't be that alchemy of cultural controversy that's not her fault that keeps this all bubbling in the culture war and makes it more of a topic. I think the black Caitlyn Clark would be popular. But the funny thing is you brought up Steph, but that was a controversy in a very similar way that we've memory hold because he's been so great for so long that people forgot that they had whatever objections they had. Steph Curry's rise was so sudden from guy people liked to, oh my God, is this guy the best in the sport? A lot of these conversations happened and a lot of this sort of resentment, it was very similar. And there was a lot of cultural commentary that does white America just love the little light skinned black dude and they wouldn't feel that way for another guy. And that's part of the whole thing. And that's part of the appeal that was trying to be explained. Then Steph did it for as long as he did it, and people forgot about that whole thing. But it was not dissimilar. And end of the day, yeah, maybe these things are part of why somebody becomes popular, but the conversations often happen from this resentful perspective as though we can just sub them out for somebody else. And you can't. So, yeah, maybe Caitlin Clark being white is part of her popularity, but there's only one Caitlin Clark. So I don't really know what to do with that. If somebody's coming to me and expressing that misgiving, I don't know what to do with that because she's here, she's great, she's really popular. I don't know what we should just be in denial of it because it's not fair that a hypothetical person exactly like herself wouldn't be as popular. That just seems crazy to me. And yet that's the way a lot of people approach this sort of thing.
Yeah, my last point on that is the only way to prove if, well, first of all, you're right. She wouldn't, without the racial component, there wouldn't be quite so many fights and awful announcing and Barstool Sports, and all of them wouldn't be as involved in it. And that draws attention. But I think the people, and maybe you can make an argument, and that draws attention. And then somewhere downstream of that attention, an 8-year-old girl goes to an NBA game.
Yeah.
But there's a million girls playing high school basketball. It's like actually, I think 600,000. But there's hundreds of thousands of girls playing high school basketball, and they have been doing this for years and years and years. And they all want someone to root for. And the most obvious person for them to root for is the most exciting player. So if you're going to have someone who is orders of magnitude more exciting, and she is, than everyone else on the floor, I think it's going to draw attention. The only way I can really work the experiment is to say, all right, is there a version of Caitlin Clark who is also black doing this, not in the women's game, but in the men's game, and that's Steph Curry? Are there white great NBA players who you could argue are the best or second best player in the NBA? And are they so much more popular in jersey sales than the black players? And Sabrina Ionescu is not. And
She does,
Taurasi are.
she does have
Hmm?
a shoe, though. She does have a
She
shoe.
has a shoe. I know, but the excellent white NBA players aren't close to Caitlin Clark in popularity. Many of the black players in the NBA, WNBA, surpass Caitlin Clark. I just think that when you norm for all the variables, it's just how good Caitlin Clark is in the
That's the
aspects of her game.
that's the most important component. That's the
Yeah.
there's other things, and what happens with the think piece world, and when it gets into the New York Times and all these other places, you end up having people who then will be very forward with the census category stuff and will overrate and overstate the importance of that because they don't care about the core of it, which is basketball. The guy who runs Black Sports Online, I'm trying to remember, Robert Little was saying that he kind of teased it like a showman of I'll explain why all these black men like Caitlin Clark. I'll explain it. I'll explain it. I'll explain the answer. And then it pulls in the audience and it's how she plays. It's how there are a lot of
She's
black
very good.
basketball
Turns out
fans
she's very good at basketball. Yes.
in the United States. This is how she plays. I mean, that's what That's the majority of what's happening here. That's the majority of what people are drawn in by. And that's not going to be a compelling argument to somebody who doesn't necessarily care too much about basketball and is just a passing observer. But that is the majority of what's going on right here.
Have you okay, answer about your wife and the House of Strauss or not. I'll just say I
Hmm.
have a couple of kids who are somewhat basketballish fans. Sometimes I'll show them a highlight, send them a highlight, pass them a phone. I definitely have never sent them a John Kell Jones highlight. I definitely have never sent them a Brittany Griner highlight. I will never send them a highlight of a big WNBA player, getting a rebound or putting up a good layup in the paint. But I always send them a highlight of Caitlyn Clark, and I will send them a highlight of Tarasi or someone else doing something amazing from distance. And so I don't think anyone else in the WNBA just has that highlight brain sphere like Caitlyn Clark does.
No, I don't think so. Maybe I should share some of that stuff. I haven't really thought about what draws. I mean, what tends to draw them in nowadays is people narrating their own live video game playing on YouTube. That's the
Yeah.
So I have to work backwards from there as far as what works when it comes to getting my kid interested in sports. There's something though that you said that I did want to dwell on because you talked about a million girls playing basketball. If I am going to continue to be sharply critical of Nike,
Yeah.
which I wouldn't have felt as emboldened to do when I first had an inaugural article on my Substack that was critical of them. But back then, their stock price was 3 times higher, roughly, than it is right now. So now I feel emboldened. Now I feel like I might be right and they might be wrong. Back then, there was a sense of, well, I have my observation, but who am I to say? Am I still here? Do I have a stable enough internet connection? I
We're
don't
all
see.
here.
Did I go
No,
away?
you're here. No,
Did, did
no, you're here. You're telling me about Nike stock price and
okay,
now,
okay.
yeah. This is
Um,
against. I heard you and Glass Spiegel. By the way, there's a Robert Glass Spiegel in the chat. I'm very excited about that. But I heard you and Ryan talking about the fact that the Nike decline comes against general market increases. So this is
yeah.
pretty
Well,
shameful. And I looked up Adidas stock, and they've done much better than Nike have. Granted, they're a German corporation, but wait a minute, they're a German corporation. They're not supposed to have done it as well.
the
So yeah,
Anthony Edwards bump is what that is right there that they're getting at Adidas. It's that Ant Man. That's the charismatic product to move right there. Um, I really did not like the Super Bowl ad that Nike did because of what you're saying. And what I mean by that is this. It felt it was this tagline of "You can't win, so just win." It was this sort of weird resentment tinged feminism from their roster of female athletes saying you can't win. They say you can't win, so win. And I don't think that there are a bunch of people in 2025 who have that attitude or if that's prevalent. But what is prevalent in 2025 is that a majority of these women's high school basketball players, their dad is going to be a huge component and connection point to the game. This is what I've observed in life with friends. And that's what Caitlin Clark had. Her dad was heavily involved as a sports dad. And that's also the person who will buy the product. And maybe that's not rebellious and subversive in Nike's estimation, but what about what about family, Mike? I'm a sentimental kind of guy, but I think real. It feels like if you're going for that market and saying that nobody's really spoken to this cohort, is girl bossy, lean in, resentment. Like, is that really the way to go? Or
yeah.
maybe to
That
acknowledge, I don't
that
know.
seems to be. You know what that seems to be? That seems to be like when Elizabeth Moss says to John Hamm, "Well, sex sells," and John Hamm gets extremely mad at her and says, "That's what people who don't understand our business try to put together in ads.
Yep.
That's what people who don't understand the actual appeal of women's sports in 2025 are trying to do. They're trying to sell you on a narrative of oppression, and that's not the narrative. That the narrative is family connection in the family and hard work and belief in yourself. That is the actual selling point, or should be if you're good at this."
Or fun or just creativity or some of these positive sentiments instead. And I hear this from some of my friends who are in the ad making business, and I can't reveal too much as far as sourcing, but they get frustrated because I have friends who are huge NBA fans who make ads for some of these companies. Let's just say that they've worked for companies that rhyme with Meiden and Schmedity is what I will.
Okay, sure, sure. The Shmanities, yes.
Yes, and what they get frustrated with is it's often populated the people in the room that they're working with these art school kids and people from prestigious colleges that don't have that kind of love and connection. And so they're going to emphasize give you an example. Giannis Antetokounmpo, he had a shoe launch and he has a remarkable story. Nobody
Yeah.
would deny that. He has a crazy immigrant hard scrabble story. But my friend was just tearing his hair out going, "Nobody buys a shoe over this. This is something that appeals this is something that appeals to a highly educated person about what's important about Giannis Antetokounmpo,
Yes.
that
The
he
air refugee, the
yeah,
air immigrant,
the
yes.
air refuge, the Nigerian family in Greece, and, you know, coming up, that's all very appealing as a narrative, but that's not what will
Put your
connect to
foot into
basketball.
the melting pot, yes.
That's not how your 7-year-old thinks about stuff and why they wanna put a shoe on their foot. That's not how it goes, but that's what they're can't get them not to.
Okay, I want to talk about the NBA playoffs. Here's the story of the playoffs. Did your best player get hurt? You lost. There are a couple of exceptions. Uh,
Yeah, the
SGA beat Jokic, and neither of those guys were hurt.
well,
But in general,
your second best player got hurt with the Nuggets, so then they lost.
right, right. John Morant got hurt. Jason Tatum got hurt. Steph Curry got hurt. All the hurt players, they lost.
Yeah.
That's a shame. Uh, I think that it's probably chance because we're talking about of all these hurt players, we're talking about they each played in what 9 games or 11 games before they got hurt. I don't know. I don't know if that's enough to say that you're going to get hurt in those games, but it's a little bit plausible to say that the yo-yoing of the schedule isn't a. Oh, by the way, Jalen Brown also got hurt. He had a torn meniscus. They were eliminated anyway, but add that to the data set. So, but you think it's stronger than that? You think
Yeah.
that the crazy schedule really is in endangering these guys?
I think it's a combination. I mean, the schedule is basically what it used to be. It's not like we have a new schedule. What we have are new demands placed on the athletes. And there's a revolution in how defense was played, altered by the rules. And I don't know how arcane to get for you people. Again, we haven't established what you people want. We don't know if you want politics. We don't know if
Tell
you
me, tell me what you want to tell me. Don't be audience captured.
Okay, are you guys ready to recapitulate the rule changes and how defense was played in the early 2000s and where we are today and how it all connects? We used to have something in the NBA called illegal defense, and basically it was rules banning zone defense. For that reason, defense was less physically taxing back then than it eventually became when illegal defense was done away with and was ollie oxen free, and you could effectively nearly play defense however you want.
Yeah,
So
which is a little odd since the zone defense is supposed to be less onerous than man to man. But go ahead.
yeah, but man to man, you often could take a little bit of a break. You could well, okay, so there are reasons for this. Now I have to go through the whole thing, I suppose.
Damn
Maybe I don't know if I have to go through the whole thing. The
it!
way the man defense was played led to more of a post up game. Since you weren't allowed to shade over people to the big man, it was more of a post up game back then because the big man would have room to operate. You could send a double team at the big guy, but the double teamer would have to run right back from whence he came. You couldn't do fancy or sneaky. You weren't allowed to. That was illegal defense. So it was a more plodding game of Patrick
Yeah,
Ewing calling for the ball, bounce, bounce, bounce. After that, it becomes more perimeter oriented. Shooting becomes more in demand to spread the floor. And Tom Thibodeau, as an assistant with the Celtics, begets this. Everybody is on a string as this amoeba, and they're just moving constantly. You never get a break. You never get a breather. It used to be you would have to guard hard when your guy got the ball. Now everybody's got to have hyper vigilance constantly. And as that progressed, combined with the old schedule, I think it became too much to bear for these ligaments. And this isn't You're not imagining it if you feel like it's happening a lot more now. It happens a lot more than it used to, and it's deciding series. And it's unclear as to what feasibly can be done about it. But I think it's a combination of a schedule that's more fit for the past and demands that just increase in the present. And it all collides and it creates all these depressing injuries.
All right, there should be an all NBA team, an all defense team, and an all ligament team.
All
Now,
ligament.
before we got on the call, I sent you a theory of mine that I don't even know if I believe, and it does denigrate Jayson Tatum, who doesn't deserve it because the man played hard. But Jayson Tatum is a non-beloved NBA star, even though he's somewhere around the fifth, sixth, seventh best player in the NBA. You want to say third? I can't quite definitely blow your thesis out of the water. But I think that in the NBA, there are two types of players. There are the two types of great players: the unstoppable big, and this would be Giannis or Jokic, and the magical small, and this would be Steph. And let's take a guy like Dame. Then there are, is Luca small? He's not small, but it's called Luca Magic. He's a magical small.
Yeah.
What's LeBron? LeBron's certainly a big guy. He could play a little small. He's the one guy who's both, which is maybe what makes him great. But even Michael Jordan was a magical small. So you're either a magical small or an unstoppable big. And with the unstoppable big, it seems unfair. Force of nature. Joel Embiid has the ball and you can never stop him. It's very frustrating. If he's not on your team, you probably don't love him, but it's very frustrating. And then when it comes to the magical big, the magical small, he has huge appeal throughout the league. Tatum is big. He's very big, and he could play. It seems like at any point he could play like the unstoppable big, but he chooses to play like the magical small. And sometimes the magic is there, and sometimes it's not. And when it's not, it gets frustrating because you say to yourself, why don't you just become Giannis? So this is my analysis with Tatum, and do you think it's fair or unfair?
I think you're overthinking it. I think you're overthinking it because let me just ask you. You gotta think quick on this. I want to
Mm-hmm.
fast on this. What is
Best
Jason
switch.
Tatum great at?
I guess 3-point shooting?
Not great. He's not elite.
No,
He's not elite.
no.
Like he's elite. Eh,
Right.
This is the issue. He is a pretty good mid-range shooter off the dribble. He's pretty
Mm-hmm.
driving. He's not really elite at anything. A lot of these other guys, you ask me, what are they great at? I go, oh my God, Giannis in transition, just the biggest athletic freak, just most
Freight train.
uncontainable
Right.
force. Steph Curry shooting. You said Luca Magic, the passing, similar with Jokic. This is something that I think Colin Cowherd. There was a clip that I don't think was intended at all to go viral about Jason Tatum, and yet it went viral, where he was making a similar, it was less skills based, but he was talking about aura, as the kids say in the internet. And how,
Mm-hmm.
close your eyes, close your eyes. Magic Johnson, what do you think? That smile? Michael Jordan, that cocky grin. LeBron James throwing the chalk in the air. Close your eyes. Jason Tatum, what do you think? There's nothing. And I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what we're talking about right here. And it's not, he seems like a nice guy. He's a really good player. The Celtics
Mm-hmm.
terrible in that last game at the end of their season, and he matters for the Celtics. He plays good defense. He is not elite at anything, and I think in a way it's hard to be memorable that way. I'd say it's similar for, this is a weird way to take it, but I think it's similar for general managers. I've said this to GMs who get frustrated, NBA GMs, about why maybe a guy who won a championship didn't see his credit go up. And I say it's almost more important to have a thing than to ultimately win. We, especially general managers, we remember Billy Bean is more memorable than whichever handful of general managers won World Series of late. I think it's a little similar with basketball players where we want you to represent an archetype. And if you don't represent an archetype, but you've got the status of all the guys who do, we're going to get a little frustrated with you. I think that's what's going on.
I think you could be a Swiss Army knife. I think it's possible to be a player who is a jack of all trades, but also doesn't have that frustrating. Why don't you just be the unstoppable big quality that Tatum have? What is Duncan's signature trait? Great passing, great rebounding. Is that what we would say?
Well, I'd say Tim Duncan is the best defensive player of his era, is what I would.
Okay.
But I'd also,
Here's another one. How about this? What's Nowitzki's unstoppable trait? Mid-range jumper?
well, yeah, I mean, Nowitzki changed the NBA. They completely had a different way of doing shoot arounds called Nowitzki that they would apply because all the assumptions of how you guard certain actions were altered by the 7 footer with that launch point. And Duncan, by the way, I think at least culturally it became fundamental. He was the big fundamental. And so that was
Yes.
the conception of him. There's no
So
conception.
You think skills Nowitzki is clearly better than Tatum? Or Nowitzki owns a skill that Tatum,
Yeah.
one skill far above
Oh,
any one skill that Tatum owns.
elite big man shooter, the greatest big man shooter of all time. Though now Carl Anthony Towns is saying he's that. I don't know. Maybe he has a statistical claim to it, but Nowitzki had a thing. People got frustrated with Nowitzki, but it's just this.
Yeah.
We're talking about a different thing of people are gonna get frustrated with you. That's how it is for the stars. But Tatum has a different issue, which is that there's just no. What's the word I'm looking for? There's no stickiness. There's no stickiness to Tatum, and yet he's going to be talked about like he's sticky because the Celtics won a championship because Bill Simmons is the most successful sports media mogul of all time. So the public is going to get a whole lot of Tatum, and they're going
Hmm.
to say, "Where's the beef?" To make an antiquated reference, they're going to say, "What?"
Uh-huh.
And it's hard to explain what is this one sentence.
They're going to quote the late Clara Peller, I believe was the name of the actress. Okay, I'm going to get you out of here. I want to ask you one question, which
Okay.
is tell me about your fandom. Did it lie? I used this word already. Did it lie fallow? Was it incubating in a chrysalis while you covered the Warriors and then sprang back after you became not a civilian, but not a beat reporter? Give me an accounting of what happened to your fandom before, during, and after your time as a beat reporter of the Warriors.
Yeah, I had this very weird moment because I started covering the team for Warriors World Blog, and nobody back then cared about the Warriors. And it's almost hard to remember those days, how irrelevant they were. So they were fine with bloggers just showing up and covering the games. And it seemed fun. It was the NBA, kind of. And I remember being critical of Keith Smart playing Monte Ellis so much and maybe even playing him ahead of Steph Curry. And after a press conference, the then coach Keith Smart stormed up to me and started really confronting me angrily about it. And it was this surreal feeling of, dude, my TV just jumped out and started yelling at me. This is pain. It's a very strange feeling right here. And so it's different from that point. And then I started covering the team as a beat writer. And the funny thing is there's no cheering in the press box. That's a rule. You're theoretically to everybody, you don't care what happens, but that's not how human beings are. You clearly care what happens. And for me, it was obvious that the more the Warriors won, the easier it was for me to pay for things. I mean, there was a one-to-one connection right there as far as the better the Warriors were, the more prominent I was, the more people wanted to hear from me, the more money ESPN felt like they had to pay me. So clearly I should be rooting for the Warriors.
Yes.
I'm not supposed to tell anybody that. I think a lot of Cavs fans would say you were following me back then. We know you were rooting for the Warriors. It was very like the tweets that you were sending. We know.
Right. And then
Uh,
you could come back at them and said, I've seen the municipal budget of Cleveland. You are definitely rooting for LeBron. Same
well, yeah,
deal.
but that's fine
Yeah.
because they're open about it, and you're not supposed to be open about it when you're a beat writer. But then it all got a little muddled because it was easy to root for the Warriors while covering them when they were this rocket ship between 2014-15 to 2015-16. But then everything got a little bit breaks of the game, the moment the E True Hollywood story turns a little darker with Kevin Durant. And then there was more friction, and my relationship with the team was different because people were angry within it about things I said. And I never rooted against them, but it just didn't have that kind of purity of just being happy with the result. It was changed from that point. And every now and again, I'll watch the Warriors and I'll root for them. I like when my neighbors are happy about the Warriors, and people tend to talk to me about them in the neighborhood because that's the association. And I don't know anything beyond what they know. I don't have any insight beyond what they have, but I want people in this area to be happy. But it's strange because I've got this vague memory of the people, a lot of them I'm seeing on TV as people in my life, at my old workplace, at my old job. And so I just have an odd relationship to the whole dang thing, Mike. I'm not quite a fan, but I'll root and I'll enjoy their success, and I want this thing to keep going and go as long as it can.
Do you think if they had retained Keith Smart? No, no, I'm
No,
not being too.
Ellis, that Monte, that was clearly the
You like her though. You personally really like
yeah,
her. I
yeah.
hear you speak pretty highly of him all the time.
Yeah, I like Steve Kerr, and he taught me a lot about winning. That's true. I mean, nothing that is actionable for me because I'm not going to coach a team or play for one.
Well, look, you have the what second or third most, maybe the most successful sports. Well,
Yeah.
maybe after this live chat where you didn't know
Ooh,
whether to, you didn't know whether to take the cues of the audience. Maybe it'll be fourth. I don't know, but you're one
well,
of the most popular ones, and maybe Kerr taught you a little bit about
Steve
strategy.
Steve taught me about giving face instead of saving face. It's all you, Mike. It all came from you. It was all your ideas. I had nothing. Um, yeah, I like Steve. When he gets into the politics and all that, I don't always agree, but that's his right. And I there are moments where I've criticized that before, when he didn't speak out on Hong Kong with Daryl Morey. So there's an aspect where I don't love everything Steve has ever said or everything he's ever done, but I think that he's built a wonderful thing. And I didn't agree with Chamath, uh, who what did he say that they'd have more championships if it was somebody else, and he called Steve Kerr a hapless rube. Uh,
Mm,
Twitter fight
mm.
because I guess Steve was sticking up for Harvard against Trump, and I don't think I liked what Steve said when he stuck up for Harvard against Trump. But I'm not going to deny the massive impact that he had in building this culture and totally changing it. I saw it, and I don't like when people do that in general, as a digression and aside. I don't like when people are angry at somebody over politics and they try to minimize their contributions in a non political realm. But that's a different topic for a different day.
Well, who is last question? Speaking of Chamath, who is the David Sachs of the Golden State Warriors?
I wonder if these questions operate under the false premise that there is an answer.
Do all questions. Think of them as Zen cones first and questions second.
In affect, I think Kirk Lacob, the son of Joe Lacob, reminds me of Dax. I like Kirk Lacob, not me insulting him. I like dealing with him, but he's got a similar affect. Maybe you could
Mhm.
say he's the Sax, but I don't know. Sax is a there aren't many David Saxes out there. Sax is a very idiosyncratic figure in culture slash politics slash that I don't know that you could really find a comp for within the Golden State.
The answer is Jonathan Kaminga. My guest, or maybe your guest, has been Mike Pesca. My guest has been Ethan Strauss. He's a contributor to my
Oh,
old book, upon further review, the greatest what ifs in sports history. He wrote a Golden State Warrior one. This was great. I want you to do more of them, even
oh,
without me.
oh my God. Well, I should tell everybody. Hey, everybody, don't go away. Hear my promo. I'm going to start a new show, a YouTube show under the aegis. Is that how you pronounce it? The umbrella of Mark Halperin's two-way empire, the burgeoning empire. It's going to be called Random Offense. It's going to be on Friday. It's going to be at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Mike, I have called in a favor. He will be on. So if you like Mike Pesca, if you
Yeah.
want more Mike Pesca, there
And if you're
will be
not an
more.
Orthodox Jew,
There will be more Pesca at 1 p.m. Pacific on Friday on YouTube. Random Offense is the show. Trying to get a little more interactive out there, trying to call people up to the floor and do some of what Mark Halperin is doing. So that's my promo. That's my plug in addition to the House of Strauss Substack, Mike.
I have a gist list Substack. I wish we could have gotten a little more interactive. Someone who went to Cal with you was in the chat.
Who? Wait, who?
Random.
Who went to Cal with me?
It's a big school. Some guy named I don't know. I can't. Israel Salas.
Oh
Do you know?
yeah,
All
I know.
right, there you go.
I do
There you
know.
go.
Okay, well, that's fun. Hey, Israel, that's so cool.
W- were you there when Aaron Rodgers was there?
For 1 year of Aaron Rodgers, one magical year. Didn't know
He
how
was
good,
good. Yeah.
but I saw enough to be mortified and mystified that the 49ers passed on him. He was clearly going to be amazing and clearly going to be a controversial political figure 20 years later. That was obvious at the time. Totally obvious.
Trace Crutchfield wrote in saying that they'd wear the Caitlyn Clarks. Like I said, we had a Bob beer drinker writing in about Nike stock. So we saw, but we couldn't get to everyone. We'll be more interactive on the two-way, which I think of Michael Moynihan's empire, not Halperin, and
Ah,
taking the brand off them. Those
well,
two guys, they go at it like Little Penny and Shaq.
ah, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll trace the producer of this here show, so you will be spending more time with Trace. And yeah, Moynihan, Helper, and Friction. Now I'm getting a little bit ambitious. Can I have both of them on my show and have them argue and be the mediator of this thing? That could be very intriguing.
Yeah, yeah, we could do an all the smoke years later, and you could have the sit down between them.
Oh, all the smoke does have some good content. The Reggie Miller episode. Okay, okay. Well, you probably need to wrap up, but this has been fantastic.
That
Thanks
was
for.
so good. Thanks for doing it. It was great, and thanks everyone for joining. We'll talk to you. I'll talk to you next week, and I don't know. Ethan will talk to you on Friday. Join that.
Okay, see everybody.
Bye. Oh, I hope I'm not still.